The cream-colored envelope felt heavier than it should have as Margaret Turner held it in her weathered hands. Outside her modest apartment in Queens, New York, the October rain drummed against the windows, creating rivulets that distorted the view of the busy street below. She traced her finger over the elegant calligraphy that spelled out her name, already knowing what lay inside. "Mom, you need to open it," her son David said gently from across her small kitchen table. The steam from their coffee cups rose between them, creating a momentary veil. At 32, David had inherited his father's kind eyes, but his mother's stubborn streak. Margaret sighed and carefully opened the envelope. The wedding invitation was everything she'd expected. Ivory cardstock with gold embossing, announcing the marriage of Victoria Elizabeth Turner to Harrison James Wellington III. Her daughter's name looked foreign paired with such formality. "The Plaza Hotel," Margaret read aloud, her voice barely above a whisper. "Black tie required." David reached across the table and squeezed her hand. "She's still your daughter, Mom. She wants you there." "Does she?" Margaret set the invitation down and walked to the window. The Manhattan skyline glittered in the distance, a world away from her two-bedroom apartment. "We haven't spoken properly in 3 years, David. Not since she started dating him." The him in question was Harrison Wellington, heir to a real estate empire that spanned the East Coast. Margaret had met him exactly twice, once at an awkward dinner where he'd barely made eye contact, and again at Victoria's law school graduation, where he'd whisked her away before Margaret could take more than a few photos. "She called me last week," David admitted. "She's nervous about the wedding, about bringing both worlds together." Margaret turned sharply. "Both worlds? Is that what we are now? Her other world?" "Mom, that's not what she meant." "I know exactly what she meant." Margaret's voice carried 25 years of single motherhood, of double shifts at the restaurant, of scraped knees and science fair projects and lonely nights wondering if she was enough. "I raised that girl with these hands, David. Fed her, clothed her, put her through Columbia Law School by working 60-hour weeks. And now I'm an embarrassment to be managed." The silence that followed was broken only by the rain and the distant sound of sirens, the soundtrack of their neighborhood. David stood and moved to his mother's side, both of them looking out at the city that had been their whole world. "Remember when she was 8? He said softly. "And she insisted on having her birthday party at your restaurant because she wanted everyone to know her mom made the best food in New York?" Margaret smiled despite herself. "She made me wear my chef's hat to cut the cake. She was proud of you. She still is, in her way." Her way. Margaret repeated the words like they were foreign. When did my Victoria start having her way that didn't include me? The answer hung unspoken between them. It had started gradually. The designer clothes replacing thrift store finds, the weekend trips to the Hamptons instead of Sunday dinners in Queens, the slow fade of phone calls from daily to weekly to monthly. And then Harrison had appeared, with his Harvard MBA and his family's compound in Connecticut, and the distance had become a chasm. Margaret walked back to the table and picked up the invitation again. There was a small card tucked behind it that she hadn't noticed before. In Victoria's own handwriting, it read, "Mom, I know this is a lot, but it wouldn't be my wedding without you. Please come. B." She wrote that herself, David pointed out. No wedding planner, no assistant, just her. Margaret stared at her daughter's handwriting, the same loopy V she'd used since elementary school. For a moment, she could see Victoria at 7, flower in her hair, standing on a step stool in this very kitchen, learning to make her grandmother's empanadas. "The Plaza Hotel," she murmured again. "Do you know what a wedding there costs?" "More than our apartment," David said with a wry smile. "More than this entire building." Margaret sat back down, suddenly feeling every one of her 58 years. "What am I supposed to do there, David? Stand around with the Wellington dynasty pretending I belong? Making small talk about yacht clubs and investment portfolios?" David pulled out his phone and showed her a text. "Victoria sent me the seating chart. She's been fighting with the wedding planner for weeks about it." Margaret squinted at the screen. Table arrangements filled the image, each one meticulously labeled. "Where am I?" "That's the thing. You're not at any table yet. She won't finalize it until she knows you're coming," she said. David hesitated. "What did she say?" "She said she doesn't know where to put you because she doesn't know who you want to be at her wedding. Her mother, or what?" David looked uncomfortable. "Or the help." The words hit Margaret like a physical blow. She stood abruptly, moving to the stove where a pot of black beans simmered. Her automatic response to any emotional upheaval was to cook. "The help," she repeated, stirring the pot with perhaps more force than necessary. "Is that what Harrison's family thinks? That I'm the help?" His mother made some comment, apparently, about how convenient it was that you had catering experience. Margaret laughed, but there was no humor in it. Catering experience. 25 years as head chef at Delicia's, my own recipes, a James Beard nomination that I couldn't afford to follow up on, and she reduces it to catering experience. Mom, David's voice was firm, you're going to that wedding. You're going to hold your head high, and you're going to remind everyone, including Victoria, exactly who Margaret Turner is. And who is that? Mito? A woman who smells like kitchen grease and speaks with an accent when she's nervous? Who owns 3 dresses, none of them suitable for the plaza? A woman who raised 2 kids alone and never missed a school play? Who taught herself English by watching Julia Child? Who can make a 4-course meal out of leftovers and love? David's eyes were fierce now, protective. A woman who built a life out of nothing but determination and dreams. Margaret felt tears threatening. She turned back to her beans, blinking rapidly. She used to help me in the kitchen at the restaurant, remember? Every Saturday during high school. She'd do her homework at the corner table and then help with prep work. I remember. She was good at it too. She was. Quick hands, good palate. I thought maybe... Margaret trailed off. She'd thought maybe Victoria would want to learn the family recipes, carry on traditions. Instead, her daughter had chosen law school, chosen a different path. A better path, Margaret had told herself, until that path led away from her entirely. The phone rang, startling them both. David checked the caller ID and raised his eyebrows. It's her. Margaret stared at the phone like it might bite. It rang again. Mom, answer it. With trembling fingers, Margaret picked up the phone. Hello? Mom? Victoria's voice was smaller than Margaret remembered, uncertain. Did you get the invitation? I did. A pause. Then, are you coming? Margaret closed her eyes. In that moment, she could hear every layer of her daughter's voice. The successful lawyer, the nervous bride, the little girl who used to fall asleep in her lap after long days at the restaurant. I don't know, Mija. I don't know where I fit in your new life. Mom, please. I know things have been different, but I need you there. I need my mother at my wedding. Do you? Or do you need someone to fill a role to check a box? She heard Victoria's sharp intake of breath. That's not fair, isn't it? 3 years, Victoria. 3 years of canceled dinners and unreturned calls and watching you disappear into a world that has no room for me. I know what you meant, and I know what I am. The question is whether you want Margaret Turner, your mother, at your wedding, or whether you need me to pretend to be someone else, someone who fits better with the Wellington world. The silence stretched so long Margaret wondered if they'd been disconnected. Finally, Victoria spoke, her voice thick with unshed tears. I want my mom. The one who taught me to be strong. The one who showed me that hard work matters more than pedigree. The one who I've been too scared to disappoint by not being perfect in this new world. Margaret felt her own tears fall now. Oh, Mija, you could never disappoint me. You know that. Could you? Victoria's voice broke. Could you come over? Tonight? Just us? I'll cook. Well, I'll try to cook. And we can talk. Really talk. About the wedding. About everything. Margaret looked at David, who nodded encouragingly. What about Harrison? He's in Boston on business. It would just be us. Like old times. Like old times. Margaret wondered if they could ever recapture those times, but she heard the longing in her daughter's voice that matched her own. Okay, she said softly, but I'm bringing the food. You might be a brilliant lawyer, but you still burn water. Victoria's laugh was watery but real. I learned from the best how not to cook. After they hung up, Margaret stood in her kitchen, surrounded by the familiar smells of home. David hugged her tightly. You're doing the right thing, he said. Am I? What if she wants me to be someone I'm not? Then you show her who you really are. And if that's not enough for the Wellingtons, then that's their loss. Margaret pulled out her largest pot, the one she used for special occasions. Help me pack up the beans. And call your tia Rosa. I need to borrow her car. If I'm going to have dinner with my daughter, I'm going to remind her where she comes from. As she began pulling ingredients from her pantry, the good saffron she saved for special occasions, the dried chilies her cousin sent from New Mexico, the vanilla beans she'd been hoarding, Margaret felt something shift inside her chest. She didn't know what would happen at the wedding. She didn't know if she could bridge the gap that had grown between them. But tonight, she would cook for her daughter. And maybe, just maybe, they could find their way back to each other. One meal at a time. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight filtered through the clouds, casting her small kitchen in golden light. Margaret Turner, mother, chef, survivor, began to cook. And for the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. The doorman at Victoria's Upper East Side building looked at Margaret with polite confusion as she struggled with 2 large shopping bags and a covered pot. The October evening had turned crisp, and she'd had to park 3 blocks away. Rosa's ancient Honda Civic looked as out of place here as Margaret felt. I'm here to see Victoria Turner, she said, adjusting her grip on the bags. Miss Turner Wellington? The doorman's emphasis on the hyphenated name wasn't lost on Margaret. Is she expecting you? She's expecting her mother, Margaret said firmly. His expression shifted, a flicker of recognition followed by professional courtesy. Of course, Mrs. Turner. Let me help you with those. He reached for the bags, but Margaret held tight. I've got them, thank you. Just point me to the elevator. The ride to the 20th floor felt endless. Margaret caught her reflection in the mirrored walls, her best sweater, pressed jeans, the silver at her temples she'd stopped dyeing 2 years ago when the restaurant cut her hours. She looked exactly like what she was, a working-class woman visiting a world that wasn't hers. Victoria opened the door before Margaret could knock. For a moment, they just looked at each other. Her daughter was thinner than she remembered, her cheekbones sharp beneath perfectly applied makeup. The power suit had been replaced by designer jeans and a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than Margaret's monthly rent. Mom, Victoria breathed, and suddenly she was crying. Mascara be damned. Margaret set everything down and pulled her daughter into her arms. Victoria still fit there perfectly, her head finding that spot on Margaret's shoulder it had claimed 28 years ago in the delivery room. Shh, mija, it's okay. I'm here. They stayed like that until Victoria's tears subsided. When she pulled back, her face was blotchy but more real than Margaret had seen it in years. I'm sorry, Victoria whispered, for everything, for the distance, for the silence, for being such a coward. Let's get this food inside before it gets cold, Margaret said gently. Then we can talk. Victoria's apartment was exactly what Margaret had expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, pristine white furniture, abstract art that probably cost more than a car. But there were touches of the old Victoria, too. A photo from her law school graduation on the mantel, a throw pillow with the Columbia logo, and there on the kitchen counter, the old Molkajet Margaret had given her when she first moved out. You kept it, Margaret said, running her fingers over the volcanic stone. Of course I kept it. I haven't used it much. Victoria looked ashamed. Harrison prefers European cuisine. Margaret bit back her first response and instead began unpacking her bags. Well, tonight we eat like Turners. Help me find your biggest pot. I brought enough food for an army out of habit. They worked side by side in the gleaming kitchen, and for a few minutes, it was almost like the old days at Delicia's. Victoria's hands remembered the rhythm of chopping cilantro, the careful way to handle hot chilies. She even remembered to warm the tortillas properly, a small miracle that made Margaret's heart squeeze. Tell me about the wedding, Margaret said as she stirred the pozole she'd brought. The real story, not the version for the society pages. Victoria poured them both wine. Good wine, Margaret noticed, not the $8 bottles they used to share, and leaned against the counter. It's gotten so big, Mom. What started as an intimate ceremony somehow became a 300-person production. Harrison's mother has opinions about everything. The flowers, the music, the food, the guest list. She took a large sip, especially the guest list. Ah, Margaret kept her voice neutral. And where do I fit on this guest list? That's the thing. Eleanor, Harrison's mother, she keeps trying to minimize our side. She actually suggested we limit it to just immediate family to keep things balanced. Victoria's voice turned bitter, as if the Wellington dynasty needs balance against the Turner family of queens. Maybe she has a point. We are different worlds. Victoria's head snapped up. Don't do that. Don't you dare take her side. I'm not taking anyone's side. I'm trying to understand why my daughter has spent 3 years running from where she came from. The words hung in the air like a challenge. Victoria set down her wine glass with a sharp click. I wasn't running from you. I was running towards something else. Can't you understand that? Help me understand. Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you traded your family for a membership card to a club that will never really accept you. That's not... Victoria stopped, frustrated. You don't know what it's like, Mom. To be in those rooms, those meetings, those parties, and be the only one who didn't summer in the Hamptons or go to prep school. To have to prove every single day that you belong there despite your background. Despite it, or because of it, Margaret abandoned the stove and faced her daughter. The Victoria I raised would have been proud of where she came from, would have told anyone who looked down on her family exactly where they could shove their opinions. That Victoria wouldn't have made partner at Wellington, Harwood and Associates. The name came out like a confession. Did David tell you? Harrison's father made me partner last month, the youngest in the firm's history. Margaret felt a chill. You took a job at your father-in-law's firm? It's not like that. I earned it. Every billable hour, every case win, every client I brought in, that was all me. In a firm where your name is on the letterhead? My name isn't. Victoria stopped. It will be. After the wedding, Turner Wellington. And then what? You disappear completely into their world? Become someone I don't recognize? I'm still me. Are you? Margaret gestured around the apartment. Where's the girl who used to dance to salsa music while washing dishes? Who knew every regular at Delicia's by name? Who swore she'd use her law degree to help people who looked like us? Who came from where we came from? Victoria's face crumbled. She's here. She's just lost. Margaret softened, pulling her daughter back into a hug. Then let's find her, mija. Together. They ate dinner properly at the dining table instead of standing at the kitchen counter. The pozole was perfect. The fresh tortillas still warm. The salsa just spicy enough to make Victoria's eyes water in the way she'd always loved. With each bite, Margaret watched years of pretense fall away from her daughter's face. God, I've missed this, Victoria said, reaching for seconds. Harrison's chef makes these deconstructed foam things that look like art but taste like nothing. His chef? Margaret tried to keep the judgment out of her voice. He has a whole staff. Chef, housekeeper, driver. Victoria must have seen Margaret's expression because she quickly added, for the estate in Connecticut, not for the city. And after the wedding, where will you live? Victoria pushed pozole around her bowl. He's bought a penthouse, Tribeca, 15,000 square feet. Jesus Christo. What do two people do with 15,000 square feet? Entertain, mostly. The Wellington social calendar is extensive. Margaret watched her daughter carefully. And is that what you want? A life of entertaining? Of charity galas and country club lunches? I want Harrison, Victoria said firmly. I love him, Mom. I know you don't see it, but he's not just his last name. He's kind and funny and he supports my career. He's just also a Wellington with a mother who thinks I'm the help. Victoria winced. She didn't mean it like that. How did she mean it? Victoria sighed. Okay, she meant it exactly like that. Eleanor Wellington is a snob of the highest order, but she's not marrying Harrison. I am, and you'll be part of that family. Going to their gatherings, raising your children in their world, my grandchildren. Margaret's voice caught on the last words. Victoria reached across the table and took her mother's hand. Who will know exactly where they come from? Who will spend weekends in Queens learning to cook with their abuela? Who will be proud of every part of their heritage? Will they? When their other grandmother is filling their heads with talk of legacy and breeding and proper society? Then their Turner grandmother will have to speak louder, Victoria said with a small smile. She always was good at that, despite herself. Margaret smiled back. You remember when you were 15 and that teacher said you'd never make it to Columbia? And you marched into school the next day and gave her a piece of your mind in 2 languages. Victoria laughed. I was mortified. You got into Columbia. I got into Columbia. Victoria squeezed her hand. Because you taught me to fight for what I wanted. To never let anyone make me feel small. So why are you letting them do it now? Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Because somewhere along the way, I started believing that to fit into Harrison's world, I had to leave mine behind. That I couldn't be both, a Turner and a Wellington. And now I'm 20 pounds underweight from stress. I haven't cooked a real meal in 2 years, and I'm planning a wedding that feels more like a corporate merger than a celebration of love. Victoria's voice broke. I miss my family. I miss you. Margaret stood and went to her daughter, pulling her close. I'm here. I've always been here. I know. That almost makes it worse. Victoria pulled back, wiping her eyes. Can I show you something? She disappeared into what Margaret assumed was the bedroom, returning with a thick binder. The wedding plans, she explained, setting it on the table. Eleanor's vision. Margaret flipped through pages of gilt and crystal, of 7-course menus featuring things like molecular gastronomy and fusion concepts. The flowers alone could fund a small scholarship program. It's very fancy, Margaret said diplomatically. It's ridiculous. Victoria slumped in her chair. None of this is me. Or Harrison, honestly. He wanted a small ceremony on the beach. She trailed off. What did you want? I wanted to get married at St. Augustine's, where you used to take us, with Father Miguel officiating. I wanted Tres Leches cake and your friend Maria's band playing after dinner. Her voice got very small. I wanted my mom to cook for my wedding. Margaret felt tears threaten again. So why didn't you ask? Because Eleanor said it would be quaint. Because the partners at the firm expect a certain level of display. Because I've spent 3 years trying to prove I belong in their world, and a queen's wedding with homemade food would undo all of that. Or it would show them exactly who you are. Where you come from. What made you strong enough to succeed in their world in the first place? Victoria laughed humorlessly. You don't understand how they think, Mom. To them, struggle isn't character building. It's just embarrassing. Then why marry into it? Because I love Harrison. Victoria's voice rose. Is that so hard to understand? That I can love a man whose family doesn't appreciate mine? Margaret was quiet, thinking. Then, does he stand up to them? When they dismiss your background, your family, does he defend you? Victoria's silence was answer enough. He's working on it, she said finally. His whole life, he's never had to go against his family. They're formidable. And you? Are you not formidable? The girl who graduated summa cum laude, who passed the bar on her first try, who made partner before 30. She's not formidable enough to demand respect for her family? It's complicated. No, Mija. It's simple. Either you're proud of where you come from, or you're not. Either your husband respects your family, or he doesn't. Either you want your mother at your wedding as herself, or you don't. Victoria's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, and her whole demeanor changed, softening. It's Harrison. He's asking how dinner is going. What will you tell him? Victoria looked at her mother for a long moment, then typed, having dinner with my mom. She brought pozole. It's perfect. She showed Margaret the response. Save me some, and tell your mom I can't wait to finally get to know her properly. Finally? Margaret raised an eyebrow. I may have been keeping you two apart, Victoria admitted. I was so worried about worlds colliding that I didn't give anyone a chance to bridge them. Margaret studied her daughter's face. So what now? Now? Victoria closed the wedding binder with a decisive snap. Now I remember who I am. Victoria Turner, soon to be Turner Wellington. Emphasis on the Turner. She stood, pacing with sudden energy. Eleanor wants to minimize our guest list. She's about to learn that the Turner family is extensive and loud and proud. She thinks she can relegate my mother to some corner table. She's about to discover that Margaret Turner doesn't sit in corners. Victoria? No. Mom, I'm done. I'm done shrinking myself to fit their expectations. I'm done apologizing for where I come from. And I'm absolutely done with this ridiculous molecular gastronomy menu. Margaret felt a spark of hope. What are you thinking? Victoria's smile was pure mischief, the same expression she'd worn as a child when plotting something. I'm thinking the plaza has multiple dining rooms. What if we did both? Eleanor can have her 7-course Wellington extravaganza in the main ballroom, and we'll have our reception, our real reception, in the terrace room. 2 receptions? Why not? Let the Wellingtons have their champagne and small talk. We'll have music and dancing and food that actually tastes like something. Victoria's eyes were bright now. Mom, would you consider catering it? Our reception? You and your team from Delicias? Margaret's heart stopped. You want me to cook for your wedding? I want my mother's food at my wedding. The recipes I grew up with, the ones you learned from Abuela, the ones that taste like home. Victoria grabbed her hands. I'll pay full catering rates, of course. This isn't about cheap labor, it's about— Stop. Margaret's voice was thick. Just stop. You think I care about money? My daughter wants me to cook for her wedding? Is that a yes? That's a— We'll need to discuss logistics, and I'll need my full team and absolute creative control. Victoria laughed. Really laughed, for the first time all evening. Done. Whatever you need. They spent the next hour planning, the wedding binder pushed aside in favor of Margaret's worn recipe notebook she'd brought in her bag, just in case. Victoria remembered dishes Margaret had forgotten she'd taught her, suggested combinations that showed she'd been paying attention all those years in the kitchen. The Wellingtons will lose their minds, Victoria said gleefully. 2 receptions, 2 menus, 2 different worlds at one wedding. And you're okay with that? The conflict? I'm tired of avoiding conflict. I'm tired of pretending to be someone I'm not. Victoria looked at her mother with clear eyes. I want to get married as myself. All of myself. The Columbia-educated lawyer and the girl from Queens. The future Wellington and the forever Turner. Margaret felt 20 pounds lighter. That's my girl. I'm going to need your help. Mom, Eleanor will fight this. The wedding planner will have a meltdown. Harrison, she paused. What about Harrison? He'll need to choose a side. And for once, it better be mine. They talked until midnight, planning menus and guest lists and how to handle the inevitable Wellington resistance. When Margaret finally gathered her things to leave, Victoria stopped her at the door. Mom, will you come to the tasting? The official one? With Eleanor and the plaza chef? I could use backup. Margaret thought of facing Eleanor Wellington, of sitting in the plaza's gilt dining room, of being judged and found wanting. Then she thought of her daughter, finding her way back to herself, needing her mother's strength. When? Thursday, 2 o'clock. I'll need to change my shift at the restaurant. Mom, if this works out, if we really do this, I'm hiring you and your team for the weekend. Full staff, full pay, plus overtime. This could be huge for Delicias. Margaret kissed her daughter's forehead. Let's take it one step at a time. First, We survived Thursday. As she walked back to Rose's car, Margaret felt the city differently. The lights seemed brighter, the air less heavy. Her phone buzzed. A text from Victoria. Thank you for tonight. For the food, for listening, for being my mom. I love you. Margaret typed back. I love you too, Mija. Always have, always will. Driving back to Queens, Margaret began mentally planning menus. This wouldn't just be wedding food. This would be a statement. A declaration that the Turner women were done hiding, done apologizing, done making themselves small. Eleanor Wellington wanted to dismiss her as the help? Fine. Margaret would show her exactly what this particular help could do. And maybe, just maybe, she'd remind her daughter, and herself, that there was more than one way to be formidable. The Plaza Hotel had no idea what was coming.